Hello, and welcome to the Port Huron Statement. This episode is called Why Kids Part 2, Kompromat. Kompromat, short for compromising material, it has a Russian linguistic origin, but the tactic is universal. The tactic is global. It is blackmail fuel. At its most sophisticated, it's a tool of statecraft, of espionage, of soft power, institutional control, strategic immunity, and the perpetuation of coercion, of duress, of control. Think of Kompromat as a parallel currency, as money in the power economy. It isn't traded on Wall Street, but it can be traded. It doesn't come with receipts, but in certain circles, it can be worth far more than gold, especially contingent upon contexts. And children are the dark cornerstone of Kompromat. You might ask, why kids again? Why this particular horror, this specific type of exploitation? Why is this the lever chosen to control so many people? The answer is not only cruelty, it's durability. Pedophilia is both universally condemned and uniquely stigmatized. There's no return from it in public life if you are effectively outed. Which means one recording, one photo, one witness, and you're potentially destroyed or owned forever. That's why it's used. That's why it's engineered. This is all designed to perpetuate a hierarchy. Not only is Kompromat a means of extorting, it's also a means of gatekeeping. Because a lot of these institutions, individuals, etc., that have amassed a lot of power want to be able to assure obedience. And this has become a mechanism to do that. Let's talk logistics. This isn't about catching predators in the act. It's about creating predators, grooming them, inducing them, getting them on tape through substances, perhaps, through seduction, through manipulation, through setups. There are all types of different mechanisms. Through culture. Epstein's Island wasn't just a playground, it was a production studio. North Fox Island wasn't just exploitation, it was a form of network building. It was a means of producing something of an army. These weren't isolated cases, they were infrastructure. And that's what's built doesn't get built for nothing. Once someone is compromised, once there's footage, a witness, a dossier, they're no longer free. They're useful. They become puppeted. Judges, politicians, police chiefs, media moguls, silent, tethered, some active collaborators, some simply paralyzed. It's not speculation, it's pattern recognition. Franklin, Dutroux, the Finders, McMartin, Jamie Saville, the pattern isn't that they happened, it's that they were covered up the same way. Stonewalling, ridicule, lost files, vanishing witnesses. The pattern is protection of the system, not the people. Further, if we get into the Epstein situation in particular, what we have there is an example of an intelligence service asset collecting Kompromat that then began to sell said Kompromat to the Israeli intelligence service Mossad, resulting in amazing leverage over U.S. geopolitics in regards to Israel. This is extremely evident by the very nature of the United States' relationship with Israel, most especially under Trump and Biden, given the known Kompromat issues for both of them. Because you have to remember, it's not always the target that needs to be compromised either. It can be close personal friends or relationships. So this broadens the scope and possibilities for developing and leveraging Kompromat. And eventually, it becomes somewhat normalized. In fact, it can be culturally completely normalized in an absolutely insular culture, what is called a designed community. So anyway, what is this system we are talking about? One where control matters more than justice, one where institutions survive at the cost of children, one where abuse isn't the exception, it's the function. Not every cop, not every politician, not every agent or judge is in on it or even particularly aware of it, although they are aware of the vague corruption and varying patterns of justice. But when a certain percentage are compromised, they don't have to be. There is a critical mass point that's hit. You call it institutional capture, where functionally the institution runs at the behest of power, regardless what that power demands in relationship to the law. When the threat of exposure is enough, that's the genius and the horror of Kompromat. You can absolutely control someone. And when enough people in a system are compromised, you can control the system. What happens when exposure is threatened? What happens when something seriously telling of this social manipulation structure that has been unleashed locally and beyond? What happens when it's potentially unveiled to the public? People disappear. Stories fall apart. Deaths are ruled accidental even when they aren't. Documents get stolen. Computers get damaged. Look at Epstein. Look at the hundreds of sealed files. Look at the names we don't see in the news. Kompromat protects the protected and destroys the rest. If you don't have the leverage and if you don't have the resources, you are being trampled by this system. The victims, the whistleblowers, the dissidents, sometimes people like me, maybe even you, we know in Port Huron. You're probably asking, how do we fight this? The first thing is to understand it and to document it. If you're in a situation where you're intimate to these types of machinations which are going on, speak about it, share it, make it so there are too many targets to be eliminated. Make it harder to discredit. Make it harder to kill. Harder to erase. Information can be a shield as long as it's shared and as long as people are receptive to it. I know that there is a shared experience. And so once we start to recognize the systematic means by which it's being enabled, we can start to disable it. But that requires a lot of honesty. And the fact is that the biggest threat to understanding and obtaining something close to justice in the wake of the horrible injustices that have been committed in pursuit of political and social control against the American people and the people of the world. The biggest threat to it is the gaslighting, the dismissal, and the simulacrum that this is not happening. But in the shadows of power, information becomes the ultimate currency. Not just any information, but, especially that which can compromise, control, and silence. The realm of Kompromat, right, is highly motivational. The making of the... Okay, excuse me. The goal now is to go through the historical examples. J. Edgar Hoover. The United States has its own history with the darker side of intelligence gathering. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, while ostensibly focused on national security, amassed vast amounts of personal information on politicians and public figures, while the explicit targeting of children for Kompromat on a systemic level by the FBI is debated. The principle of compromising information for power was certainly employed. In fact, the J. Edgar Hoover FBI is such a complex example of the leveraging of Kompromat. And again, the debating of whether or not the FBI is explicitly involved or just permissive is the only question. Because when we look at the finders and we look at North Fox Island and the Oakland County child killer, we look at the Franklin scandal, I mean, we look at Epstein, it's just over and over and over again, you see what is effectively enablement by the FBI. So, I mean, we can go. So I have all these examples, and I'm debating on how I want to present this. I think that we're pretty much done, because this is going to start a whole nother sequence of... I think I might do a third one of these, and maybe even a fourth one. Oh, but I did want to segue into this, that, yes, well, I think I already said it, but yeah, inside information. Epstein was an intelligence operative that was selling Kompromat to Israel to give Israel leverage over the United States. That's how he amassed most of his fortune. That's not public information, so... It's true.